is that then the Christian critique that says postmodernism is ultimately hyper-modernism? It's modernism on steroids. Is that the idea?
It's partly that, but I think it's more fundamental than that. It's that postmodernism lets modernism set the rules of the game and then reacts. So it takes Descartes, for example, and the individual cogito as that which must be engaged with. And then it has various ways of deconstructing and messing around with the cogito in order to show that it doesn't do what Descartes wants it to do. Whereas I think a more radical critique, and this is what I try and point out in the books, a biblical critique, would be to deny Descartes' terms of reference to begin with, to say that we don't need to start there, and indeed we shouldn't start with the individual cogito. There's a much richer account of Trinitarian reality that means that we never have to begin with Descartes to begin with. And so it's in as much as they accept the terms of reference delegated to them, if you like, by modernism, that it's almost an argument that says, well, I wouldn't start there.
But there's not a constructive proposal about where one should start, or at least not an ultimately satisfying one. Is that fair?
Well, yes. I mean, in a sense, it's hard to reproach people for starting where they are and where their culture is. So that the sort of majority non-theological Western culture has been shaped by Descartes and Hobbes and Hume, as you will know better than I do, and so forth. And so in starting with these thinkers, I don't think it's necessarily a fault of theirs, but it's something that the Christian looks at and says, well, I have resources that are unavailable to you. I can engage with a reality that doesn't have to trace its way through modern and early modern European thought. I'm not beholden to Hobbes and to what John Milbank would talk about as his sort of ontology of power, the way in which society is fundamentally structured around ideas of power. I don't need to start there. In fact, I don't want to start there, and I shouldn't start there, because I have an account of reality in the Bible where the intra-Trinitarian relationships of love are more fundamental than any brute ontology of power in society. And so rather than sort of wagging the finger at Derrida and Foucault for doing this, because in a sense, where else would one want them to start? I think the Christian can come along and say, look, I have resources that are unavailable to them for thinking about this. So let's see what happens when you start with the Trinity instead.